Hi, my name is Constant Brand from the EEA Press Office, and welcome to our EEA Ask an Expert today. Joining me today is Cécile Rodier-Kefelec. Welcome. And today we're actually talking about the environmental footprint at work, notably our footprint here at the European Environment Agency and what we are learning in that respect to reduce our emissions at work, reduce our waste, and basically we have an aim of going carbon neutral in the future. So we'll delve into that. Before we do, if you have any questions for our expert today or comments, put them down in the comment section and we'll make sure we get to it, because I think there's some relevant and interesting points for people at work and how we can all do our part to reduce our footprint. So Cécile, perhaps we can start our discussion. How well are we doing here as a European Environment Agency here in Copenhagen to reduce our agency footprint? Perhaps draw some context first, how big we are and what we're dealing with.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Costo. Here we are in Copenhagen. We are now more or less 300 people in the agencies, and we are so far doing good in our environmental commitment. For two main reasons, I will say. First, because we are placed in Denmark and in Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a very environmentally friendly city, so that helps a lot on some aspects of dealing with carbon emissions, especially when it comes to energy. We have a nice renewable energy grid here in Denmark, so that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cycling city, so that also reduces a lot the use of car to come to work, for example. So there is elements of the context that are quite nice. On the other hand, Denmark is a bit on the side of Europe, so we are a networking organization, so we are welcoming quite a lot of experts, European experts across Europe. And that is having quite a huge impact on our carbon footprint, because when we bring people coming from Greece or Spain to Denmark, so it's quite a heavy burden as well for our staff when our staff is traveling.
Sure.
For networking. So we have advantages of being in a climate-friendly city, but as well some disadvantages, especially when it comes to travel, because we are situated in one corner of Europe.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we are doing quite well. So far, we are monitoring some areas. We probably can come later on that. But we are within our targets for most of our areas. So
Okay.
in 2023, so last year, performance were within the grid targets.
Okay, and what perhaps we can start a little bit, what do we mean by carbon and environmental footprint to begin with?
That's very good point. So what we mean by carbon footprint is a way to account for greenhouse gas emission. So not only the CO2, but all the other gas that have an influence on the warming effect. So we are usually accounting those greenhouse gas effects as CO2 equivalent. So a couple of methodological aspects to get there. And when we are doing a carbon accounting, we are looking at 3 different scopes. And this scoping element is to account for direct emissions and indirect emissions. So scope 1, for example, is direct emission from sources of emission that we have a full control.
Mm-hmm.
Our energy, for example.
Yeah.
We know what type of contract we have. The same for water. We know what type of contract we have. We can have a direct management of it. If we want to reduce, we can do it. The second scope is indirect emission that is linked to the product or service we are purchasing. So it's linked to our procurement process. So here we have a potential direct elements on the way we specify the way we want to purchase a product or a service, even if we don't have direct control on the proper emissions.
Sure, like transport, like getting it.
No, it's a third one.
Okay.
Third one is really the total indirect emissions.
Yeah.
So it's mainly travels.
Yeah.
It's many travels. So our travel as staff, our visitors' travels, the way we commute, the way we telework. So this scope 3 is the most complicated to assess and to monitor. So usually when an organization is doing a carbon footprint inventory, so it's quite easy to do scope 1, scope 2, and then scope 3 is usually a management decision, and it's usually a stepwise approach. We are not fully covering scope 3 the first time because it requires to get the input data.
Sure. Yeah.
So to be able to monitor commuting, so then you need to have an idea of how people are commuting. So it's usually through surveys or looking at the already input data that we have in our own system. So at EEA, we've done the carbon footprint calculation the first time in 2019, when so our executive director was saying, okay, we probably should raise our climate ambition. So that was linked to the EU Green Deal ambitions of the Commission's wanted to become carbon neutral and having a target of reducing by 55% our emissions as the continent. So as EU, we said, okay, we probably need to go in that direction as well. So we did a study, and then we did our first full carbon footprint account. And in that scope, we included, okay, our travels, visited travels, teleworking, and commuting through a survey. So that gives us quite a nice idea. So 2019 is basically our baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah, so far. And based on that, it's where we did a pledge to become carbon neutral by 2030, which means getting neutral by 2030 is more or less reducing our carbon emissions by a bit more than 50%, 54%.
Not to zero. That's not possible. That's not realistic.
That's not only it's not realistic, but it's also a compromise that we need to have in. So as I was mentioning, we are a networking organization, so we cannot, reduce drastically our travels and then hamper our capacity to do our work. So there, it's this balance that we have to find in still commit to a reduction, but also not putting at risk our activities. On the other side, our activity as an environmental agency, through our core work, so our publications, the way we try to have an impact is also a positive element. So part of our work will probably have more impact on reducing carbon emission in Europe than the effort we can make at the organizational level. So it's also part of the discussions that we have in-house on how we put that into perspective. As you were saying, we still have unavoidable emissions.
Yeah.
So the key principle is to reduce emissions, but we know that we will have unavoidable emissions. So since 2006, I think we are compensating our emission, at least the staff and visitor travel. We are compensating through a scheme, which is a golden standard scheme, so it has been verified and certified that it's not greenwashing.
So these are offsets for air travel, noticeably. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Perhaps we could talk a bit about how this is all regulated for the agency and perhaps for other companies and private sector as well. We are part of what we call the EMAS scheme. Can you explain what that is?
So EMAS stands for Eco Management and Audit Scheme, and it's an eco management principle that has been put forward by the European Commission in 1993, I think. And it's an attempt to go beyond the ISO standard for environmental management, so the ISO 14001.
And these are standards that are used across many sectors by companies, businesses, industries.
So those the ISO or EMAS is really meant to help companies to organize their environmental management system. So it's a set of measures that are standards across companies so that it can be comparable. And EMAS is looking at different areas of consumption, so what we call the significant environmental impact. So at EEA we have assessed that significant environmental impact. So it's energy, so under energy is electricity and heating, it's water, it's our paper consumption, so more on resource side, so it's paper and water that we are looking at. In terms of pressure, we are measuring our waste generation. And the last one is on greenhouse gas, so it's mainly our travels. But we are also looking at, in terms of greenhouse gas, we are calculating the greenhouse gas equivalent of the already consumption I was mentioning.
So like energy,
Yes.
the sources of that energy, for instance.
There is one area that we are not monitoring, it's biodiversity, because we are placed here in central Copenhagen, and we are in a quite low cement area.
Yeah.
So we basically don't have any biodiversity possibility. So we have excluded that area from our scope so far.
Okay, okay. And how did we sign up for this scheme?
So I think we were front runner in it. So the Commission was the first to be EMAS registered. EEA is the second one. So we are EMAS registered since 2005. So we are really seen as the leading EU organization when it comes to environmental management. So since then, we have been certified on a regular basis. So that certification.
Who does that? Who does that?
So certification is done in two steps. So we need first to have an external verifier that comes here, do an audit, and check that we are doing things according to the regulation, and as well that we are doing things according to what we say we will be doing, and that we are monitoring that on a regular basis, that we are transparent about it. So the verifier is coming here, looking at it, provide either recommendation, or if they see deviation, so they will say, okay, there is a deviation there and there, you should do something about it. If there is a deviation, the deviation is closed, so they say, okay, we are happy with your situation, we think that you comply. Then it goes to the certifier's body, which is in Denmark here, the Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, so Danish authority comes in here. Okay,
yes.
So that's how it works.
So the Danish authority wants so the verifier is saying everything is in place. They look at it as well and say, okay, fine, we can certify you as EMAS.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's usually, so the EMAS cycle is a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years, we go through a higher audit. And in between, they are just verification audits. So the auditor will just pick up elements, not look at the full scope. And so far, we have always been certified, so we are doing good. But one of the principles of EMAS, compared to the ISO, is this continuous improvement. And within the continuous improvement is having strong leadership commitment. So, which the ISO is not asking for example. So right. It means that it needs a strong staff engagement, but as well an engagement from the top management. And this engagement from the top management is usually described in what we call an environmental policy. So we do have an environment policy. So this is the main difference with the ISO. ISO is not asking for this strong leadership engagement. EMAS does. So we have an environmental policy. And this environmental policy is basically saying that as an organization, we are committed to be climate neutral and resource efficient organizations. So which means that, yes, we are monitoring areas, We are engaging with staff. We are annually providing our performance in a transparent way. And we are also committing to be a bit the leading EU organization so that we can also help other EU organizations to get there.
Yeah, obviously as an environment agency we should be walking the talk, talking the walk, as it were. Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. Be interesting to know what your workplace is doing in this area. If you have any comments or questions, please post them down. Are your organizations collecting waste? Are you asked to reduce your carbon footprint, commuting, how you work? Do you turn the lights off at work? How does that work in your area of work? It'd be interesting to share your thoughts on this. We'll get to the problem areas. Obviously, we're not perfect here.
Nope.
And we're certainly not going to start preaching like that. So the end goal is carbon neutrality. Is that achievable? Are we talking about zero emissions?
No, we are not talking about zero emissions. It's not feasible.
No.
So as I was saying, for a networking organization, it's not just feasible. But the end goal is really to reduce our carbon footprint. And
so maybe, what are the challenge areas? What is the key?
Our problem area is our travels. So staff travels and visitors travels. Flights.
Obviously, it's the fastest way to get here.
Yes.
In and out.
Yeah. So here so the pandemic has helped. So if you look at our graphs, 2020, 21, we had a so huge decrease in our travels. So that helps as well to speed up new way of working. So we, as an organization, we already had some video conferencing, but that was not the norm.
And I think a lot of people will ask, well, why don't you just stop the travel and do everything by video conference?
Yes. So I think we have increased a lot the use of video conferencing. But still, we need to have physical interactions. So this is a challenge. So how we find a good balance.
Mm-hmm.
And when looking around with what the other organizations are doing or try to put in place, so we are currently looking at the possibility to first provide near real-time figures of where we stand with our carbon consumptions, basically. So we don't have that yet. We are usually doing it backwards. So we are...
Sure.
So that doesn't help to take decision, right? So have it 1 year later. So one of the improvements we are looking at it to help in reducing and making choices about what are the necessary travel and the one that are probably not that important and that can be replaced by other means. So that is, I think, having first this CO2 status will help, so we know where we stand.
So, for instance, I have to check whether or not it's sort of like a quota or something, or
so quota will be the next.
So I have
step.
to check with a certain department in-house before we decide to go on travel somewhere to see if we
I think there is
within the limit.
Two steps in it. Yeah. The quota will be the next step. First, it's just to provide information. So, Constant, you want to go on missions. So when you are booking your missions, you have a direct access to say, okay, in the EEA, we stand at X ton of CO2 at the moment. It's X% of where we stand last year. Mm-hmm. So you will know. So just for information.
Yeah.
So this is the first stand. So your manager will have the same information, and then on that they can potentially take a decision.
Sure.
So first for information. Next steps is go for a budget or quota. So meaning that we agree at the organization level of a certain amount of CO2. And then we say, okay, how we distribute that across the organization. This is a management decision.
Sure.
So it's purely semantic, but discussing with other colleagues doing the same work in the organization, we tend to avoid using budget when we come to carbon, and rather a quota, because budget has this psychologically consequences, then when you have a budget, you are tend to consume fully the budget you have.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this case, we would like not to consume the full
Sure,
budget.
you should consider the impact right away.
Yes.
Mentally. Yeah.
So that's why we are
Yeah.
more advocating for a carbon quota,
Yeah.
so that managers can play with and take decision across.
Yeah.
And we disentangle that from a budgetary financial budget. That is a different discussion.
Okay, cool. We'll talk some more about other like waste, other impacts, but I have a question already about. Tina has a question. More and more people are working from home after the pandemic. Are companies shifting their carbon emissions to their employees' homes?
Yes. So we are perfectly aware of that. So that's why in our carbon footprint calculation, so you remember I mentioned the scope 3, where we included in our scope the teleworking aspects. And to be able to do that, we have been running a survey to ask people how they're organizing their home office. And it's a bit tricky. So, because to account for the home office energy consumptions, heating consumption, water consumptions, it's a bit complicated, right?
Yeah.
So we made an assumption, so we haven't been in the granularity of the very details, but we just looked at where our colleagues were situated across Denmark. And we have used what we call emission factors that are linked to the commune where they are living. So we just applied the emission factors of that home office work.
Okay.
So we account for it. It's an estimate. It's not very detailed figures, but it's estimated in our carbon footprint.
Okay, great. We'll get to another question. Again, if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to get them in now. We're almost out of time, but we still have some other things. Perhaps quick fire answers if you could. How are we doing on paper waste?
Oh, paper. So paper consumption.
Which was a problem for a lot of companies over the years.
We have been doing so good on
Okay.
paper. So we have decreased so much our paper consumption. So the pandemic helped, definitely, but we are maintaining that very good habit. So the number of pages that are printed by staff is really low. And as an organization, we agreed that we will not print our publications. So we have zero printing policy. So that's really has...
Is this a trend we're seeing in other agencies,
yes,
EU bodies,
and
industry? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about waste?
So waste...
we're talking about old computers, we're talking about
all type
tables,
of waste.
furniture, food waste. Yeah.
Food waste, we have an agreement with our canteen to reduce food waste. So they have put in place different elements so that reduce people of really having too much on their plate. So meals are served in one single plate.
Yeah.
People can ask for more rather than having a big plate and throwing it away. And we are monitoring that with them, so which is so far going quite good. On the other type of waste, so in Denmark, the policy in terms of sorting has changed last year, so we have complied with it. So it means that the fact that we are sorting waste has decreased a lot the household waste, so the remaining part, which is good as well. We have a question mark so far is about the recycling. So we are sorting our waste, but we not necessarily have full control on how effectively all those different streams of waste are properly recycled. So this is something that potentially needs improvement. It's outside our control. But there is two big areas of waste. Is the IT waste. So we have been refurbishing the building here and changing a lot of IT equipment. So we have put in place an IT donation policy. So for equipment that were still functioning, so we first offer staff if they want to take them away. And we also have opened up a call for external organization that may be interested to come and take those.
Yeah.
It works quite well.
Yeah.
So we have been donating screens, computers, phones.
Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. I have another question from Oriol. Actually, ISO 14001 also requires a policy statement. The difference with EMAS is more about the communication of a comprehensive report, which is mandatory for EMAS, but as you said, and voluntary for ISO unless otherwise required by regulation.
Yeah.
Perhaps a
Thanks
question.
for the question.
Yeah, but EMAS, do the demands increase over time? I'm sure that since it's from the early 1990s, I mean, the ambitions, do they change over time?
The ambition of EMAS?
Yeah. As a signee, are we asked to do more to step up our ambition?
Yeah, yeah. So ISO, like EMAS, so there is always this continuous improvement element, which is the key of it. For office organization like us, so we have reached a plateau where the extra improvement is getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
So except for travels, but for the rest, this really to make this extra effort, it's really really hard. But I would say for other organization, if we look at the EMAS key figures for this year, so there is a fact sheet that the EMAS organization is putting forward. So at the moment we have a bit more than 4,000 organizations that are EMAS registers across Europe, which represent a bit more than 17,000 sites. And the area which is most EMAS registers is the area of waste collections.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because it helps really to streamline.
Yeah.
Then it's the public administration.
Okay.
So there is a bit.
Okay, we're running out of time. I just want to get in one more question from Tina. How do you get your colleagues to reduce their carbon footprint? I guess it's a big behavior issue.
It's a
How
big
do you
behavior.
change habits, behaviors?
So it's usually linked to staff engagement. So we have been producing guidelines to really push colleagues to be mindful when they ask for going on mission. The same for our visitors. So we have put forward guidance in encouraging our partners to consider video conferencing rather than coming here. Being the environmental agency is probably not helping in that sense, because taking care of the environment is the core activity of all of our colleagues here. So they already have this huge feelings that they are already doing a lot. So they are probably less engaged in this continuous improvement than an organization that will have nothing to do with environment. So that yes, people will care of doing their part. So it's a bit the schizophrenic situation we're having at the moment, being the environmental agency. Even if overall we are doing quite good, except on travels.
Okay. Again, we have the links to the latest EMAS report that we published just a few weeks ago as well in the comment section, as well as the EEA's environment policy and our ambitions to go carbon neutral. I think that's all the time we have for today. So thank you, Cecile.
Thanks.
For your help. And again, if you have any further questions, just jot them down and we'll make sure we get them to them. Thanks for watching today, and we'll see you next time.